Hello and welcome to another episode of the DVD Graveyard. Tonight we're going to be talking about Razorback from 1984, directed by Russell Mulcahy, or as I like to call it around my house, Razorback. Anytime I'm going to put this in, that's what I tell my wife. I'm like, you want to watch Razorback? That's so fun to say. Try it. I highly recommend it. It's fun to say it in the accent. I apologize if I've offended anyone with my poor Australian accent. But, for anyone who doesn't know, a razorback is a wild boar. It's a hog, and apparently they have problems with those in Australia. And actually, I think, to be honest with you, everywhere else in the world, because wild hogs are a invasive species, and they will just take over and decimate everything. And that's kind of what kind of caught my attention with this movie is, we have a boar problem around here, and boar have always really fascinated me because they're such an interesting and destructive and very just unique animal. Pigs are just in general. And they are scary. I mean, I wouldn't want to run up on, even one large boar, in the middle of the woods. That would scare me, even a normal size one. And they can get huge. I mean, they're just, if you go and look, I mean, there are reports of just these massive boar that have existed. So that's really kind of what caught my attention to this movie. That, and I really love a good, naturalistic, I guess you could say, horror film where, you take an animal, something that does actually exist in real life, and, you either make that thing giant or whatever have you, but that is your movie monster, is a actual creature that does exist. Something like piranha or orca, or even alligator, anaconda. The Ghost in the Darkness is another one. I could go on, and then of course Jaws. Kind of being the quintessential one. And even newer films. I still get a kick out of like Primate. It's probably the most recent one, and of course Beast with Idris Elba. Those are fun ones that I'd like to talk about at some point. But speaking of Jaws, I kind of went on a side tangent there. But this movie actually gets compared to Jaws, quite a bit. I see. A lot of people I've heard say that this is Mad Max meets Jaws, because this is an Australian film. And I actually disagree with that. I don't think that the Jaws comparison is really fair, because I think a lot of things get lumped into being compared to something like Jaws. Now, of course, some of the things I did mention, like for Piranha, for example, that's definitely, you could link that to Jaws if you wanted to, or even say something like Orca, you could link that back and say that, oh, it's just a ripoff of Jaws. But I think that really takes away from how good those movies actually were on their own, and I think it just automatically kind of cheapens it, comparing it to Jaws and saying that it's just a Jaws ripoff. Now, having said that, not to just shit on Jaws by any means, but I pretty much prefer all of these movies that I've just mentioned over Jaws, personally, but that's just my personal opinion. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I've seen Jaws a billion times and I'm tired of it being, held at such a high standard. I don't know. Jaws is good. I don't want to just sit here and shit on Jaws. Don't get me wrong. I do like that film. Not so much the sequels, but I definitely like the first one. So, like I said earlier, this is an Australian film. Russell Mulcahy is a Australian director, and I think that this is actually his directorial film debut. So before this, he directed a lot of music videos. Like, I think he did videos for Elton John and Duran Duran, bands like that. He did a lot of really unique videos for those bands, and he has a really interesting directing style. And honestly, I'm so glad that he was given this movie, because I think that I'm not going to say that he is the reason that this movie is so great, but his directing style is one of the main reasons that I enjoy this movie so much. I mean, the effects are great, and what we do get is great. I think that the pig looks great, but I think that it would have, this movie did kind of flop whenever it came out, if I'm not mistaken. I was going to say, I remember hearing people say that this is a $1 million movie with a $10 pig. At the same time, it is just shot so well. And of course, Russell Mulcahy would go on to direct Highlander and Highlander 2, after this, among, several other things that he's done. But I think that, this movie owes owes a great deal to Russell Mulcahy's directing style. I hope I'm saying his name right, by the way. And this isn't going to be for everybody. I will kind of say that right off the bat. But if you are a horror, hardcore monster movie, mid '80s monster movie fan, or if you're a fan of things like The Road Warrior, or other kind of Australian films, I think that you'll really enjoy this, because this movie is just it's gorgeous, which I'll have more to say about that in just a moment. So I am going to go ahead and read the plot synopsis off the back of this Blu-ray I have here, which is the Scream Factory Blu-ray. I was so happy to actually get this. And this is actually a really good Blu-ray. It's got some really, really good special features on it. And it actually comes with an alternate cut of the film, which I will I have something to say about that too, kind of towards the end. So let's see here. Somewhere in the Australian outback, there is a creature that can rip a man in half and destroy a house in seconds. Razorback. Or Razorback, is how I should have said it. It's really fun to say it that way. A giant freak of nature that's 900 pounds of tusk and muscle, which terrorizes an isolated community as violent and primitive as itself. This astonishing debut from director Russell Mulcahy, Highlander, is a ferociously entertaining, adrenaline-pumping thriller that was beautifully shot by Academy Award-winning director of photography Dean Simler, who also was the director of photography of The Road Warrior, and imbued with stunning special makeup effects by Bob McCarran, who did The Matrix. Razorback is an Ozploitation. Sorry, it's kind of cut off. There's something in the way. Yeah, Ozploitation classic that will leave you on the edge of your seat. So, like this was saying, before I kind of get into the actual review, this is probably one of the just prettiest movies I've ever seen. Like, this movie is so gorgeous. It is just, I mean, every shot in this movie is just breathtaking. There's some really trippy things in it. Like, there's a dream sequence later on in the movie that just has some really trippy shit going on. But, I mean, from the opening title, when we very first start in this movie, the shots in this film are breathtaking. I mean, just the shots of the Australian outback, and just the colors are gorgeous. And, this movie is just pure eye candy. It is so beautiful. I cannot stress that enough, that this is one of the prettiest movies that I've ever seen in my life. It is absolutely gorgeous. A movie about a giant mutant killer pig has no business being this pretty and this well shot. So this movie looks fantastic. So this movie starts out, we are introduced to Jake Cullen, who's played by Bill Kerr. And he is babysitting his grandson, and his house is just absolutely destroyed, by this Razorback, and his grandson is stolen from him. It is taken away by the Razorback, and his house is burned down. And of course, he goes to this kind of court hearing, where we're kind of getting the opening titles, and they're basically, he's trying to kind of plead his case that it was a Razorback, and nobody believes him, of course. And then, of course, after we get the opening titles, I think it's 2 years later, that is when we meet Beth Winters, who is Judy Morris. And she is basically filming like she's like a reporter. And she's basically going to this town talking about pretty much, people who are killing all these kangaroos and things like that in the outback. And she's kind of, an animal activist type person. And so she's down there, and she's, of course, she's talking with her husband, Gregory, who's played by Gregory Harrison, who plays Carl Winters. She's talking to him about it. And they're from New York, by the way. And so he's like, go down there and shoot this report that you've got to do. Everything's going to be fine. So she goes down there, and she starts kind of interviewing some of the locals in this really kind of rundown town. And, this whole landscape and everything that we see, I'm sure Australia is not really actually like this, but it is just portrayed as this barren wasteland. It really does just scream Mad Max vibes, like Road Warrior hardcore. It really has that look and feel to it, because we are deep in the outback. And she basically ends up at this this cannery. I think it's this place where they make like pet food and stuff. And she ends up kind of antagonizing these two guys who work there, who are some of the most disgusting people I've ever seen in a movie, and most unlikable and shitty people. Like, they're the worst characters in this entire movie, and they're really obnoxious. But and they're played by Chris Haywood, who plays Benny, and David Argue, who plays Dicko, are their names. And I mean, they are just some of the worst human beings ever. But having said that, the actors, did such a fantastic job portraying these pieces of shit in this movie that you really do dislike them, and they're just obnoxious and gross and nasty and just ugh. So I mean, props to those guys for portraying these characters so well. And she basically kind of antagonizes them, and she's filming at their at this cannery, and they're basically they're doing things with the animals that I guess they shouldn't be doing, and of course they chase her down, and they try to rape her, and they are run off by the Razorback, who then comes in and kills Beth. So this is kind of our first kill in the movie, and we don't really see much, really and truly, and we don't really see the Razorback a lot. I'll touch more on the design of the creature in a little while, but we don't see it much. A lot of this is just kind of a lot of quick POV type stuff. You might get the snout and the tusks kind of coming in off screen, but we don't see much of it, which I actually like. I don't like, it follows that whole rule, don't show your monster too early, so that we get the big reveal at the end. And of course, so once she goes missing, her fiance, Carl Winters, he comes down to search for her, and he runs into Jake Cullen, who basically just seems like this crazy old man at this point. He's just kind of living out in the outback, hunting down razorbacks and trying to find this giant razorback so that he can prove to everyone that this thing is real, and that is, just to clear his name, basically, because so he finds him, and he basically, sends him to the cannery place where he runs into Benny and Dicko, and they end up taking him out on this kind of, they go out at night and hunt, and they end up taking Carl with them, and they end up kind of leaving him out in the middle of the outback, on his own. And that's when we get this really just trippy, incredible dream sequence that goes on for it goes on for a little too long, to be honest with you. It feels like it's this part of the movie just kind of slows down a little bit and goes on for a very long time, but it's so trippy. And again, the movie is so pretty to look at and so gorgeous, and there's so much really just weird, cool, bizarre shit going on that it's okay. And I mean, it doesn't bother me at all, because the whole time I'm just focused on just how beautiful this movie is and how well this movie is shot. So he is kind of wandering through the Australian outback on his own, trying to make his way back to civilization, because he's way out in the middle of nowhere. And that's where he runs into Sarah, who is played by Arky Whiteley, who she actually sadly passed away very young, as a matter of fact. I think she was only like 40 or so when she died. So I mean, that was really sad. She's very good in this movie. She does a fantastic job in this film. But she's basically this researcher who has been working with Jake Cullen very closely to find this Razorback. And Carl basically tells Sarah that he saw the Razorback. He had an encounter with it amongst these other pigs at this kind of pumping station. And so she calls Jake over there, and Jake comes and kind of gets the story from Carl, and he goes out and finds the location where Carl was, and he kind of stakes it out, and he kind of has this run-in with the Razorback, and he tries to shoot it and kill it, and of course, he is unsuccessful because this thing is huge. This is when we really we don't get a great look at it here, but we kind of see just how big it is, and he ends up being able to shoot a tracker onto it, and now they're able to track it. Sarah enlists a bunch of people to, around the town to go track down this Razorback. Jake Cullen has a run-in with Benny and Dicko, who they are the ones who ultimately are kind of linked to Beth Winter's death, and they don't really want to be connected to it, of course, so they think that, and Jake knows, he kind of knows that they're up to no good because they are just some shady characters, and so they try to basically eliminate him, and they end up knocking him unconscious and killing his dogs and like breaking his legs, and Jake Cullen wakes back up at this pumping station, and he has a final run-in with the Razorback, which again we don't really see much of during this scene, but ultimately he is killed in a very violent way, which they show more in the uncut version of this. So I think that's I'll take a moment to talk about that. On this Scream Factory release that I have here, you get the uncut version of the film, but it's in VHS quality. I don't know why they didn't remaster both cuts. Maybe they just weren't able to for whatever reason, but I really would have liked to have seen the original uncut version of this film with the gore left in there. I really would have liked to have seen that remastered. So if you do at least want to watch the kills, you can either go in the deleted scenes, or you can watch that alternate cut of the movie, because some of the stuff that they cut out I really like, and I wish they would have left it in there. It makes the movie a lot more impactful, especially with Jake Cullen's death. And I was really sad whenever Jake Cullen died, because I was hoping that he would be the one to finally put the nail in the coffin and kill the Razorback and be able to prove himself innocent, but unfortunately he is not. So Sarah finds out, and she, her and Carl find out that Jake has been basically killed by Dicko and Benny, and they kind of go out after them at their place. They get, he gets Benny first, Carl does, and he ends up dropping him down a mine shaft, which is very ironic, due to the fact that that's what they said happened to his wife. That's what everybody was saying. So that's a really ironic kill. I like that kind of callback there. And then, of course, he goes back to the cannery, the Pet Pack Cannery is what it's called, to confront Dicko. And when he gets there, of course, the Razorback shows up, and it ends up killing Dicko. And then Carl has this final showdown at the cannery with the Razorback, and I love this whole sequence at the cannery. Like, this place is just so gross and nasty, but again, it's shot so well and it's so pretty. It's amazing. And this is where we get the final actual full reveal of the Razorback. This is where we see it, full-fledged, I guess you could say. And I know that, this design had got some shit. I think some people, again, like I said earlier, some people were kind of shitting on the design of the pig, whenever this movie came out. But I think it looks great. I mean, it's a big, giant, I guess, animatronic puppet is what it is, and it just looks fantastic, and it's horrifying. It is a wild boar the size of a rhino, basically. It's fucking huge, and it's scary, and it would be something that I would be absolutely terrified of, and it's absolutely an apex predator. So I think that the design of this creature is great. I love when we finally see it. I wish we could have got to see it just a little bit more, but I mean, from what we do get to see of it, it's great. So they have this final showdown, and Carl is able to push the Razorback down into this fan that's on the ground, and this big kind of fan grinder type thing, and it shreds up the Razorback, and he goes to check on Sarah, who we thought was killed earlier by the Razorback at this factory, because she comes to find Carl, and of course she's fine, and they kind of embrace, and then we roll credits. And that is Razorback from 1984. Once again, directed by Russell Mulcahy. This is such a great movie. I highly recommend this. Again, this is not going to be for everybody, but if you are a fan of 80s monster movies, or if you just like Australian films, because Australia is a beautiful country. It's a place I'd love to visit someday, and to actually see this kind of outback. I don't really care about being in the city. I want to travel into the outback and see it. So if you're a fan of just looking at, this beautiful landscape that is Australia, I highly recommend this movie. It's so much fun. It's fantastic. It's got a really great story to it. It's basically just a big revenge mission. It is kind of cheesy and goofy, at times. But, overall, that's one thing that I love about this movie. And this is absolutely an 80s gem. I think everybody, who is a fan of this era of film should check this out. It's a fantastic monster movie. Great time. Highly recommend this. You won't be disappointed for sure. If you get the chance and you're a physical media person, definitely pick up this Scream Factory Blu-ray. It's a great It's a great copy. I don't really think I think you can rent it like on Amazon Prime if I'm not mistaken, or like Apple TV. But I think that that's really the only other places that you can really watch this or rent it. But it's fantastic. I recommend, if you're kind of on the fence about it and you're not sure, watch the trailer. A lot of times I don't condone watching the trailer, but for movies, because a lot of times it spoils everything that you're going to see. But this movie has a really good trailer, and it has a lot of those really gorgeous shots in the trailer, and that's honestly what sold me on the movie. Like I saw this trailer for this film, and I was like, oh, this looks like something I'm gonna love, and I was not disappointed. I immediately went and ordered this Blu-ray, which, like I said, I got it pretty cheap. I've had this for a few years now. I don't remember how much I paid for it, but it's a great movie, and the remaster is great too. I mean, the remastering job that they did on this, especially if you watch the uncut version that's on this, that, and I like that it actually comes with the full VHS version. I really like that. I wish more movies would do that, and Scream Factory is really usually pretty good about doing stuff like that. So I'm glad that we at least have the option on this. So there may be a newer release that I'm not aware of off the top of my head. I know of this Blu-ray, and there's a few DVD releases that you can get out there. But I'm a Scream Factory guy, so I'm always going to opt to get the Scream Factory release every time. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this review. Stay tuned for the next episode, and until next time, have a great night and goodbye.